Lubbock and Plainview, can you see me and hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. And did you get the review sheet I sent?
Yes, sir.
All right, very good.
This is Judy in Plainview.
Thanks, Judy. I figured that was you. Take care. Thank you. In Plainview and Lubbock, we're taking just a couple of minutes to go over tests, so we'll get started here in just a moment. I apologize, Lubbock and Plainview, it took just a couple of minutes there, actually 5 or 6 minutes, and it went longer than I wanted it to. But this is a large class, we have 23 in here, and so, I needed to talk to everyone about their test, and I should have just postponed that till later. So thank y'all for, being patient with me. Today we're gonna forge on, and it probably won't take the entire hour for the lecture, so, you're not gonna feel cheated, I hope, from everything. But we wanna go ahead where we were the other day. So far, we talked about a lot of things concerning art. I know a lot of these terms are new to you. You may not be familiar with them. And, try to get centered here so I don't fall off my chair. That'd be more entertainment than you paid for today. And, I think I'm square. But I hope everyone's doing well, and please, stay well. But if you have to miss, anyone, contact me. You can always email me. If you have trouble, you've lost the link or whatever, email me and get that. Watch the recordings anytime you miss. That way you can stay right on target with everything. You won't miss anything. Has anyone had trouble going to the link and hearing or seeing that link? Getting the information? Has it worked well for you? Okay. Anyone looked at it at all? Some of you have, I know, because you've talked to me about it. So, it's a good system. It's not perfect. The technology still has some things they need to work out, and we've had problems with technology this last week or so. But we're gonna make the best of it that we can. But communication is really important. Remember, because with me or any of your instructors, professors, if you have any question or any worries or any problems, go to them, please. Some are more and some are less accessible, but don't be afraid to talk to them. I understand, because I had some pretty rough professors, and you'd ask them a question, they'd almost shout the answer back to you. Mr. Hope's not like that, okay? So you can talk to me, right? Communicate with me. And if there's a problem, my goal is for you to succeed. I want to do the very best I can for you to do well. So please, let's work it out, okay? I have people fail my class every year, which just, I don't understand. But usually it's because they don't work at it. And those of you know that this test was not that difficult, but it was difficult, right? It was different for you. So you had to work at it. So it's not just going to come easily, and it should be something you earn. You're earning this credit, right? But I'm trying my best to give you what I can. And if I'm failing in that, y'all let me know. But hopefully I'm getting there a little bit, right? Okay. So, today, before you leave, do not walk out of the class and make sure that we give you the review sheet for next Tuesday. And next Tuesday, when we come to class, we will go over that material. Hopefully between today and next Tuesday, you will go over that material too. You'll review your notes. If you need to go back and review the recordings, if you missed something, do that. But my notes are my notes. They're not your notes. I always say your notes are probably better if you pay attention and written down the things that I point out to you. In your own hand, it's really going to stick with you better than looking at that printed piece of paper I give you, I think. Some of you highlight, some of you write little notes in there. Whatever works for you. There are all kinds of different ways of studying and so on. But I'm going to forge on today, but one thing I really do want to make sure that everyone understands, and I've got to make sure that my phone is off, is this idea that the things like line and shape and value and texture and so on, those are the ingredients, right, in the recipe. They're the things that you put together to make a work of art. And so we're gonna finish up with that today, and we'll talk about motion, and this is where we were the other day. I hope, get back on screen here. I've gotta log back in. I logged in too early. Okay, here we are. So we're gonna start right here and talk about this. Art uses the visual elements. Some of you said different things, but the visual elements, you don't need to be looking at me, you need to be looking at that. Yes, ma'am?
Do you have that PowerPoint on Blackboard or no?
With the link, it's on Blackboard. But if you go to that link, you'll see this same thing. But I've not downloaded, I mean, it's better. I haven't done an animated PowerPoint with my, explaining all the slides, because that's what I'm doing right now. And so when you go to that link, the recording here is just what you get in class. So I think it's better. A lot of people put the PowerPoint that came with the text on Blackboard. It's just that. It doesn't have any explanation in some of those slides. So, and you notice I'm not showing every image that's in the text, and then I'm showing you some other images in the text because I think they're better to explain what we're talking about. But remember this, some of you missed this. Art uses the visual elements. We're looking at artwork, right? Now there's some artwork that's made for blind people to enjoy. And it's made so that they can feel the texture. But in general, art is a visual thing. And so we talked about that, and we talked about these visual elements like line and shape and so on, these things. Those are all the ingredients. So if you failed to capture that and remember it, to understand that, make sure it sticks with you now, because I'm going to throw something else at you here in a moment. So make sure that you get this. So today we're looking at the last one, time and motion. Remember I showed you the little video clips of Calder's Mobile the other day? And we looked at this, and it's hanging in the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., right across the street from Congress. It would help the senators and representatives sometimes to just walk over here and decompress a little bit, and maybe our laws would go smoother. I don't know. I think it would be more pleasing to them to walk in the garden on the mall or walk in the National Gallery. Here's Calder's invention. Now he did this originally with pieces of wire and cut out pieces of tin, and then this is made with heavy steel and aluminum core material that's fairly light, but still it weighs nearly half a ton, 920 pounds. And they had to use special cranes to hang it, and they took it down a few years ago and repainted it. But it's balanced. Some of you have had a mobile, right? Anybody have a mobile hanging in their house? You go to the beach or something, you get one with seashells on it or sand dollars, different things like that. See all kinds of different things. But it's balanced in such a way that there's actual movement, and we talked about this idea that people walk through this space, and just the movement of the air currents of people walking through makes this thing, it's so delicately balanced it moves. So that's actual movement, and the author talks about time, but it's actual movement. It's kinetic art. It's art that actually moves. So a mobile, and I know you look at the word M-O-B-I-L-E and you think of mobile, but mobile is how this is pronounced, just like Alabama, Mobile, Alabama. But a mobile is something that is mobile. It is in artwork or sculpture that's in movement. So it's actual movement. And then we talk about photography having actual movement. We'll look at some examples of that. But then usually artwork shows implied motion. It's something that's just frozen, it's stopped. So the motion is not really there. It's not really moving, right? It's just the implication of it. Let me get my notes out so I don't miss anything. So photography has the ability to record time in motion. We'll look at examples of that. We looked at this the other day, where this is a hunting scene, and it shows several different parts of the hunting of these animals by these people there in Spain, done Mesolithic time. That's the Middle Stone Age, right? And we looked at this work that shows these different actions on this journey or pilgrimage that Anthony took to see Paul. And we looked at this scene where people were working or not working. Works unfolding in the sequence. This is where we stopped the other day, right? This is the tribute money by Masaccio, and let me see if I can get to my slides here, or my page numbers in my textbook. Does anybody have that open to that page? That's probably page 107, 8? Okay. Oh, 98. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. Yeah, 98. I had my marker in a different place. Thank you. Yeah, 98. This is a famous scene discussed in the Bible that happened when Jesus was with his disciples, and they said, well, we need money for tribute. And he said, go out and catch a fish. And they found, what did they find in the fish's mouth? A coin. And so they took that coin and gave it. And so you see different scenes there. I think it's Peter getting the fish, and then they're going through the different parts of what happened in the conversation. And it was like a miraculous thing. So you're seeing the whole scene unfold there in one panel, right? And this is a fresco that's painted in the Brancacci Chapel there in Florence. Fairly large painting, over 8 feet tall and nearly 20 feet wide. So that's kind of frozen motion, but it's different scenes, right, put together. So you'll see that implied thing, and then you'll see works like this, which are kind of strange. I think there's a video of this, but I didn't take time to pull it up. It's an installation. We'll talk about those in this gallery. And it says that the person, Ann Hamilton, the artist, imagined each motion as a crossing. If the visitors were walking through these interlacing threads of this fabric moving, they could sit on swings, and the motion, just like Calder's mobile, would make this thing undulate all the time. So kind of different, right? Art is all kinds of different things. So that's actual movement in going on there in the gallery. And then there are distortions. We'll look at some more of those. This is actually a Navajo blanket, one of the eye dazzler blankets. It looks blurry in this picture, right? But that's an actual clear photograph of it, because the way they kind of blurred these threads when they wove this, they didn't make distinct lines. It wasn't a clear break from one color to the other. It's sort of just a little fuzzy on the edges. So that's why they're called eye dazzler blankets. Done in the late 1800s using wool that's dyed with natural dyes there by the Navajo people. These are amazing, amazing rugs. Your author includes this, next page or two there, talks about this. We've seen this before, but the figures in motion, it's like an event caught in time. But I wanted to show you this, which is not in the text, it was in the former text. But I wanted you to see this because look at the date, 1894, and Thomas Edison, one of America's great geniuses, who we owe so much to, working with his assistant, W.K. Dixon, and they had their friend, Fred Ott, and I don't know what they did to make him sneeze, but they had developed this camera system so that they could catch just millisecond photographs of a sneeze, which happens just like a chew, you know, the sneeze is over, right? But they captured just, and you'll go from the top left there, go down that whole column, and then go back to the top, and you're going to see just tiny sequences of this sneeze, which happens just almost instantaneously. So what they were doing, they were developing this system where they could capture a quick movement in a series of photographs, and then they later transferred those to a machine called a kinetoscope, which showed them in sequence quickly, so that the eye blended them together, and then that later led to motion pictures, which, how amazing are motion pictures? We take them for granted, but they are. And we have cameras on our phone that Edison would have just gone, wow, this is amazing. So, let me stop here for a moment, and I'm gonna go to my document camera. I'm gonna put myself up here for a moment and let you see if I can get back on screen here. There we go. Okay, so I have a little flip book, and I'll put this on the dot cam in a moment. But this is, some of you have made these before. Has anyone ever made a flip book? See if I can get, there we go. And I want to open up the iris on the screen. That's pretty dull. Oh, and you see the border of, no. Anyway, that's before me, the class before me. But you see this flip book here. Let's see if I can get a little more close up on it. There we go. I have a collection of these. I'm just a kid at heart. But here's one of my early inspirations to be involved in art was the work of Disney and Mickey Mouse. This is the band concert. And I think there are maybe 45 or so pages in this flip book. But if you've ever drawn a flip book and you have a stick figure even, you know that one picture, I'm not sure why we're not getting, there we go. There we're getting a little better view of this. There's the colors a little better. You see that one picture changes just slightly when you flip from one image to the next, and to the next, and so on. And so if they're flipped in a sequence so that our eyes blend them together, you see the motion. So it's like he's directing, and you can watch this. Disney's kind of persnickety about their things being on YouTube or whatever, but I've seen it, and then they'll take it down. But the band concert is one of their early efforts in doing this kind of animation, and this Mickey is dressed in this loose band uniform. He's got the baton. He's directing this concert. But while he's directing the concert, this bee comes up, and so he's swatting at the bee. Well, the funny part of it is, and you see this as he's doing this, and see if I can flip it over, and you see, there's a different one on the other side. It's not as good. But as you see this, he is swatting this bee with his baton, but what happens when he's doing this is the band is playing what he's directing. So it gets pretty fun and crazy. So anyway, here's this idea, what we call the persistence of vision. And I'm sorry that the text doesn't say this. And in fact, this would probably be a good time for me to give you my notes, right? So Judy and Ms. Betts, if you'd hand out the review notes that I sent, and let me give those to you, and I think it'll help you to focus a little better. So I have those here somewhere. And let me take a moment and give those out, so you can have those to make your notes on, because mine are a little different than the text. Got just one. I used a thicker paper. Okay. I'll bring you a better one. How Okay, so this review, you can make your notes straight on this. You can write on however you're used to writing on. Black Queen, red heart. Okay, so you see that I've written there that photography has the ability to record time and motion, but it can also show a record of things that exist and how they change. So this flip book is the idea that you're seeing a portion of motion, now here as a drawing and painting that were from the original cells for this cartoon, but our eyes see something in motion and they sort of blend it with the next thing. And that's how this works. This is what we call the persistence of vision. And yes, it's motion. Some people say it's persistence of motion, but it's really the persistence of vision. And the frame rate is about 18 to 24, sometimes 16 frames is what Edison was working with. But are any of you doing graphic animation or gaming or anything? I've had some students in class and they said we're working with frame rates that are hundreds of frames per second. I don't know how they did this, but when the first men landed on the moon, Neil Armstrong, those guys, they were shooting some film 1 million frames per second. I don't know how they did that. It was actual film, no digital anything in those days as far as photography. So what we're seeing here is in 1 second, multiple images blended together. And this is exactly what Edison and W.K. Dixon were doing with Fred Ott Sneeze. It was groundbreaking. It was a huge breakthrough. And we owe so much to them for giving us this idea. And the persistence of vision is very important to remember, because that's exactly what we would see here. And he made these kinetoscopes, and then they later transferred that to film. They could project on a screen. Amazing. Now, Bernini, going back to the text here, you have Bernini, and is that on? I've lost my page number again. Page what? Bernini has caught this, though, showing this figure here in motion. I'm not going to worry about it. I lost my page number. If y'all find it, shout out. But here's Apollo and Daphne. Now, this is a carved marble sculpture that's larger than life size. And I won't go into the mythology of this, but Apollo's chasing Daphne. And Daphne does not really want to be caught by Apollo. So the mythology is she turns herself into a tree, and that's what's happening there. You see her hands becoming branches and twigs and little branches sprouting out there. But can you imagine how hard Bernini had to work to take a chisel and hammer and no power tools in those days and carve marble? So it looks like this flowing drapery and hair and these figures in motion like this, frozen right there. Incredibly hard. But he caught it, didn't he? He caught this motion and this feeling of movement. So, as I said before, sometimes it's moving, sometimes it's implied. Now, this is not in your text either, but I think it should be, because this is groundbreaking as well. An Italian named Giacomo Balla was in a car wreck. Now, I hope you're never in a car wreck, but I've had a slight accident I was in, and you hear people say it was like things were in slow motion. And Balla was not hurt, no one was hurt, and he got out and he said, that was amazing. He said, if I could capture that in a painting. And so he and this group of his friends formed a group of artists, They called themselves the Futurists, and they said, this is what we're going to do. Now look at the date. This is what's so astounding. Over 100 years ago, these guys were painting on canvas, and they were trying to capture movement and something simple like this little wiener dog on a leash, right? And his tail's wagging, his head's moving, his feet are moving, the dog walker's feet are moving. That's an amazing work, isn't it? But you get the sense of motion, don't you? And it's caught there in that frozen in time. It's the implication of it, though. It's not real motion, right? So that's what artists do. And Thomas Eakins, the American artist, photographer, professor, he studied how motion worked. So he had this guy, Povalt, and he caught, 1884, around that time, this multiple view of this pole vaulter going across here. His paintings were so realistic because he understood the human form and how it moved. And I have a little toy, one of these. It's plastic. This is a neat one from the late 1800s. But you see through those slots and you spin it. I bought mine at a museum. I can't remember if it was the Science Spectrum. But you can spin it and you see kind of like the images move like the flip book did. So you're capturing just a little segment of each one of those movements of the person on the horse moving. Or mule, I'm not sure. It's a short-eared mule or what that is. Yes. Yes. So that whole idea of capturing motion and doing something like that. Yes.
Do you have the review? They all have a review.
Oh. I saved one special for you.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Sorry I missed you. Okay, so now your notes say this too, and it says the word op art, and your text talks about this, but not right here. You know, there's Bernini, page 111. I just have it covered up. No, that's another Bernini. Sorry. Anybody find that other one? Well, anyway. It talks about this later, but op art or optical art, it's short for optical, right? It's based on the idea of optical illusions of movement through repeating shapes and colors and so on. Now, you remember when we looked at the flag, that was the black stripes and the green stripes, and then I had you close your eyes after you stared at it and you opened your eyes and you saw the American flag in the right colors. That's what we call an after image. That's what op artists did, is they played on that idea that the opposite color appeared there after you'd seen a color. So this should be, in this idea of motion, should be part of it. And you see artists like Bridget Riley, her cataract, and does that look like it's kind of wavy to you when you look at it? And she did this not with a computer, just very precision painting with a small brush. And it's a fairly large, it's over 7 feet tall. The Tech Museum in the late 60s, early 70s bought a Bridget Riley, and that was a great acquisition for them because she was the thing for a while. She's still painting, I think, but they hung it in a very poor place. They hung it on the landing of the stairs as you go up the stairs. Why would that not be a good idea? Because you're walking up the stairs, and sometimes I don't use the handrail. You should do that just for safety. But as you look up, you see this kind of shimmering, wavery thing. That's not a good thing when you're going upstairs. So they actually moved it not long after they hung it there because I don't know if anyone had an accident, but it was just one waiting to happen. So she's just painted these stripes in such a way that it looks like there's real motion there, and that's op art or optical art. That one does it even more so, doesn't it? That's pretty wild. If you're sitting far back there, you can turn around and look at the screen back there and maybe get a better idea of it. So, op art, and then this should conclude this. Jackson Pollock actually, and we'll talk about him more later, but he took big rolls of canvas, you can see in his studio floor there, and took paint and slung it and dripped it on the canvas. So they call it motion painting. So that's actual motion to create the painting, and the paint that drips and is slung and splattered on the canvas is a record of his motion to create the painting. So that should be included in this idea of what motion is in this discussion of the last of these art elements. Any question about this so far? So I'm going to move on. Okay, and there's one of his paintings. They called him Jack the Dripper. So, the principles of design, that's the wrong chapter number, but here they are. The elements of design, again, elements of art: line, shape, value, color, texture, space, time, and motion. They're the ingredients, right, in the recipe. But the principles are the recipe. They tell us how to organize the ingredients. You're following a recipe, right? It says add these things together, heat them so much, stir them together, add them then to this. That's the recipe. Those are the guidelines for doing it, right? Do you ever vary a recipe? You change the recipe yourself a little bit, add your own little thing to it. Some people follow it to the letter. If I'm doing my mother's or my grandma's recipe, I do it just like they did. Sometimes it tastes the same way, but it's just not the same exactly, even though I don't change anything. But some people say, well, you know, what if I tweaked this a little bit? I added this, changed this, add some cinnamon in here. Okay? So that's the recipe. It's the way that the art elements are put together, right? And so the principles of design, don't get them confused with line and shape and value and so on. They're the way that you put the art elements, line and shape and value and color and so on, together. And here they are. Don't write them all down. We're going to look at them in turn. Principles are unity, variety, balance, scale, proportion, emphasis, focal point, pattern, repetition, and rhythm. Now, your text spends a lot of time on this. I'm going to kind of go through it fairly quickly. Taj Mahal is an amazing place, but it mainly talks about the symmetry of this. And it's a sad story, really. When you look at this on page 106 in your text, 103, it starts the story. Because this woman gave birth to a healthy baby girl, and but the queen died not long after that. So her husband, the Shah, buried her, but then they came back later and built this amazing monument to her. But his idea was, in following his religion, to make everything perfectly symmetrical. So the Taj Mahal is a monument to everything being balanced and symmetrical. All the designs, and even from different viewpoints. The text has all these views, even going up to the main gate and walking up this long walkway to see the Taj. I've not ever been there. I've had friends that have gone there, and they said it's pretty incredible what they did. This immense building, and that it talks about all the number of workers that built this and how long it took. I mean, from 1632 to 1648, we think the Science Building took a long time to build. This is much greater an accomplishment than that, but it took around 16 years to do it. So, pretty incredible. But we're talking about the different principles of design. The main one here is balance, and it talks about this having emphasis and coherence and so on. But look at the symmetry and everything being regular, and if there's something on the left side, there's exactly the same thing on the right side. So it's balance and symmetry, and you have these mirror images in the garden and everywhere in the building and so on. So I'm not going to do this same exact way that the text does. Even the tombs have this balance and symmetry in the screens and the floor and the way that the tombs are set up, the burials and so on. So your text talks about unity and variety. Well, you have that unity there. Unity means things are unified, right? That they fit together. But you've got to have some variety. You can't have everything the same. And your text talks about variety being there. So this idea, and I've written this on your study sheet here, and I wanna go back to something else there that I put on here about design. Let me flip to this for a second. This idea, if I can get to it, yeah, here we go. That design refers to a plan. Make sure you underscore that. Because any design is not accidental. Well, you could say, what about Jackson Pollock throwing paint on the canvas? Well, he still chose how he did it. He still chose the colors that he used and so on. So a design has to be an intentional creation. It is a composition and using a plan to organize these visual elements. The principles of design is in effect there. So that's on your notes. Now, unity and variety. Unity means everything is the same. Variety means there's something different thrown in there. And your text gives you some different examples of this. And you have artists use colors and shapes. Stuart Davis, 1938, did this work. What unifies this? Well, it's hard to find anything but variety in this, right? There's so many colors and so many shapes and so on. He called this the swing landscape. So what unifies it? We could say, well, there's certain reds and certain blues and so on, but there's more variety, I think, than unity in this work. Because there's not even, no similar shapes or anything, right? Variety kind of rules there. This artist used drawings and prints of hair, and so you have something that unifies that. It's a common thing, but all the varieties of different hairstyles that she did in these prints that were done, printed on felt. What page is that on? That's on 110? But the idea of balance, make sure you have this down. That balance is two types. Balance is symmetrical and asymmetrical. It's in your notes. And this shows this series of photographs this artist did by posing people. They actually had platforms for them to lie on. You don't see. And it's like they're off balance and falling. We know what balance is, right? If we're balanced, we don't fall down. But most of us have fallen at one time or another. So this is showing actual imbalance. One of the most famous pictures, called sometimes the Vitruvian Man, is Leonardo da Vinci talking about the symmetry in the body. So if you draw a line straight down the figure, everything's exactly the same on the right and the left, right? No, it's not. But da Vinci is showing that there is symmetry there, but it's not exact symmetry. And his secret writing backwards, but he showed this idea that if you hold your hands out, stretch your arms all the way out, you're from fingertip to fingertip equals some other dimension on your body, right? What is that? Your height. And that's the same with every person, how tall or short you are. And this shows a symmetrical building. I'm getting away from the text a little bit, but I think this helps make the point. If they make an addition, they've made several additions. This building was still being built when the Civil War ended and Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. But they wanted to make sure to show the unity that should be in our country. Sometimes we wonder these days, but the unity that should be in our country, that everything on the right and the left part is exactly the same. Now, have any of you visited Congress, seen your congressman? Hope you get to go someday and walk in there. On the inside, it's not symmetrical. But they wanted to make sure that this building is built just like the ancient Greek buildings, exactly the same on both sides. But this shows these four faces. Now, on the left side is the original photograph. But what they did is they took half of the face and they flipped it. They did a mirror image of it. So you can see that the boy's face on the left there at the top, they took his left side, what's on our right, and they flipped it and put it together. And then they took the other half and flipped it. So you see how the faces change? So it's not really symmetrical, is it? And you see, you could play a game with the mirror and show your face, the celebrity Angelina Jolie, her normal picture, and then her left side, you see the arch of the eyebrow. They flipped that digitally, and then that's a right mirror image. She looks a little different, doesn't she? One part of the face is a little puffier, one part is more slim, the jawline even. So it's interesting. So you have that idea, and your author talks about visual weight and looking at something and seeing the weight of something. All that has to, we're talking about balance and so on, and that's on page 111 in the text. The size of something sometimes makes, we know a brick is heavier than a feather, but if it's shown larger, the brick is shown larger and the feather is shown smaller, it may seem to be different than that. I like to show this. You've all been on a seesaw, right? And so this shows the image of the seesaw. A is the balance point, right? Are you taking notes on your phone? Do I need to keep your phone? All right. Well, we made that clear at the very first day, right? You see a larger weight in that top illustration there, and then a smaller weight, but it's further out. So it's moved around so it seems balanced. And you see other examples of that. Now, when I was young, my little sister loved to swing. This is a farm where I grew up. And my dad, our dad built us a seesaw. We had a swing set there, and he built that seesaw. And my little sister, and you see how tall I am compared to her, several years older than her. And when she wanted to play all the time with me, and I took care of her and watched after her. So how are we going to seesaw? Tall me and short her. Well, I put her on the end of the seesaw, and you see the handles there. She'd hold on to the handles. And so I would get on the seesaw, and I would get closer to the balance point. So we played a game where we could try to balance exactly straight. Now that's an example of actual balance, actual weights, but visual weights do the same thing. And artists use that, and these are asymmetrical balance, so it's not exactly the same on either side, just like we talked about in those other things. And there's another example of that. Here's an example that's not in the text, and your author has the Bernini sculpture. Here's Jan Vermeer again, and this woman actually holding a balance, which is used to weigh gold. There's jewelry there. If you divide this right down the center, is it the same on both sides? It's not, is it? You have a light area and a dark area. You have the heavy area with the figure and the framed painting, the dark cloth down to the left there. But does it seem visually appealing, balanced? I think he balanced it pretty well, because it doesn't have to be exactly the same for it to be balanced. But this is an example of asymmetrical balance. It's using different light and dark areas to balance it. And here's Hokusai's wave, and the text doesn't have this either, but I wanted to include it. You've probably seen this, right? I've had students that had a poster of it in their room. And you may not see the men struggling in boats there to not be killed by these giant waves. And this is one of the views of Mount Fuji, the sacred mountain, the volcano, right? Still an active volcano. But here's this giant wave coming up. So we could divide this straight down the middle. Is it symmetrical balance or asymmetrical balance? It's asymmetrical. You've got the giant wave on the left, the more gentle sloping movement of the waves on the right, and your eye can move from place to place in this, seeing the Mount Fuji and seeing the men in these ships, and this giant wave coming down. but it's a pleasing arrangement, it's a pleasing balance, even though it's asymmetrical. And yeah, here's where Bernini is. You know, author talks about him a little bit. And here's this, I mean, David, the shepherd boy, now he doesn't look very boyish there, but showing his powerfulness as a warrior standing up to the giant Goliath with no armor or anything on, right? He said, I'll take him on. And what did he use? His sling and stones. And so he's reaching back and he's ready to throw that stone. It just took him one stone, right? Hit Goliath right in the forehead, sank in, he fell down. And David went over and grabbed his sword and cut his head off and held it up. And the army fled. Their hero was gone. So, a lot of power in this, right? But you can see the twisting of the body and so on. That's an example of asymmetrical balance. It's showing how the visual weight can add drama to it. I don't think this adds to anything we've said. Here's a symmetrical design that's on page 112, and this is a Tlingit, that's how you say that, Tlingit tribe in the northwestern United States and Alaska. The Tlingits did these symbols of their ancestors and so on in these weavings and in carvings they did. It's pretty symmetrical, isn't it? Both sides. So there's symmetry. And you see this, I'll show you this Eisenheim altarpiece. I've seen this. This is one of the most amazing artworks. This is one of the panels that shows this gruesome crucifixion scene. But if you divide this down the middle, it's pretty symmetrical. But you see panels on the left and the right, and at the bottom, they're a little different. So it's a little bit of asymmetry there. So you've got an idea of what symmetrical and asymmetrical balance is. This shows asymmetry in this work. This is Vasily Kandinsky, and using geometric forms and colors. And your authors include this in there. And Black Panther, some of you have seen that. Is that a symmetrical or asymmetrical design? Asymmetrical. And you see our focus is put on the hero there, on this huge head that's shown there up close to us, and all the action going on around there in this great image from the poster from the movie. So there's sometimes things that are visually heavy, they draw our attention and our focus. And there's even such a thing as radio balance. I want to show this too. Verde means what in Spanish? Greed. So Deborah Butterfield, her only subject she ever does is horses. She loves horses. She raises them, she rides them. But here she's taken junk and she knows how to use a cutting torch and a welder, and she's made a horse, right? Now it's not finished, and the neck is open, you have strips of metal, pieces of old junk metal bent and welded together, but she's got this asymmetrical balance, but yet it works. It's a balanced work, just like a real horse would be. This is an example I had. All the persimmons are not the same, but it creates a sort of balance there too. Your text has this radial balance on page 115. This design for this canteen, pretty fancy canteen with brass and silver, but the designs all around that give this sort of balance. Radial balance is like the spokes on a wheel that go out from that. Here's a stained glass window from the Chartres Cathedral, which terrorists tried to attack and actually destroy about a year and a half ago. Thank goodness he didn't. You see the radial balance though, right? Like from the center, this rounded design. And this is a weaving a coil basket woven from yucca fiber, and I think the black is devil's claw. I don't know if you've ever encountered the devil's claw or not, but I hope you don't, because they're very sharp thorns that grab into your ankles. But they've taken that fiber and stripped it out and very carefully woven from the center. You can see how it coils out there and created this radial design. Now, emphasis and focal point, another author talks about this in a different place. We're on the back, right? talking about, how some areas are emphasized and some areas stand out more. The lobster's the area that's emphasized, right? It's a still life with all these objects, but the lobster's the focal point. Now, remember tenebrism? That focal point of the light. Here's Joseph the carpenter, his son Jesus. He raised Jesus on his earthly father. Jesus was a carpenter, right? And so, where's the focus is on, yes, Joseph working, but to look at the lighting and the way this is, a very dramatic lighting. And so, the light is on the face of the young Jesus here, watching his earthly father do this work. So, Latour, the painter, emphasizes, yes, the action, but the face of Jesus here. And you have different ways that artists do that, by positioning of things and so on. And this is what the text talks about, this visual thing that's dominating the picture, just what we've talked about already. And it shows different ways of doing that on page 116. But a focal point is that thing that you're pointed to. It's the thing that the artist wants you to see in the work. They give an example here, and things that are not as emphasized, just like the lobster and the other things. You have this example of Christ in the center of the picture, the Last Supper here, and all the attention is directed at him and his positioning in this. And here's another Last Supper by Tintoretto. The lighting makes it stand out a little bit more, and the halo around Christ, and you see the angels there and so on. So, emphasis and subordination. You're focused on him, you're not as focused on the other things that are subordinate to that. And this shows this work by an artist who wanted to show at that point in 2012 all of the people that had died in the war with Iraq. And in 2012 there were 4,487 leaves, each with a name on it. And these are prints of leaves, and then cloth and so on, paint. Now, scale and proportion is actually at the top of my review notes. Your author has on page 118 this famous image, this small figure of a woman, the Venus of Willendorf. It's talking about scale here, and you have this large sculpture of the Black Venus, and I'm sorry, that's what I was looking for. Here's the artist who did this. Here's her sculpture beside her, and then they put for scale this tiny figure of the Venus of Willendorf there. That Venus is the goddess of love. That's probably not what the prehistoric people called that little figure. But anyway, you see, scale has to do with how large something is compared to us. Now, a spoon is small. We can hold it in our hand, right? But not this spoon here. In the sculpture by Klaus Oldenburg, and we're going to run a little past 2, but y'all hang tight. Class doesn't really end until 2:15. I won't go that long. But you don't get a sense of how large this is until you see the person sitting on the grass over there, right? So that gives us scale. We can identify with it, and it's really our size compared to something else. Size of us compared to something else. We see a building being tall compared to us. And here's Oldenburg and Coucy van Bruggen did this match cover, which is made from metal and polystyrene, polyurethane, plastics. And it's really a slide. The kids don't play with matches, right? But they've made this sculpture that looks like a burning match and the flame and the slide there, the matchbook. So the scale of it's totally, instead of this tiny matchbook, this giant sculpture that's 68, almost 7 stories tall. I'm going to show you this. Is this a dollhouse with this cool painting on the wall? Rene Magritte, the French artist, liked to play with her mind a little bit, and he just called it personal values. Or is it a giant comb and a giant shaving brush, that's a bar of soap there, giant glass and match in that room? Is this the world's prize-winning rose filling up this room? Well, Magritte just painted this, and these titles he gives them, the Tomb of the Fighters, okay. But scale is something we have to think about, and your author talks about hierarchical scale. The importance of the ruler here, this pharaoh, larger than the people that he's actually domineering over here. And you have this painting. We know that this Madonna, the Virgin Mary, is not as big as the cathedral, but her importance is shown here as very large. And you have different images like this shown in the text, how the ruler stands taller than the people. And we talked about proportion already. This is a comparison of one size to the other. We talked about height. That's the width of your arms is your height. Some people measure in cubits and so on. And then this talks about how ancient people show, this is the top of the staff, the importance of a ruler. We saw the Vitruvian Man already. But I wanted to show you this as we end up here. The golden section, or the golden mean, and your text talks about this just a little bit, but it's the comparison of one side to the other. This is supposedly the perfect proportion. One side to the other, 1 to 1.618. I'm not a mathematician, but that's the golden mean, or the golden section, or the golden proportion. The Greeks used it in their sculptures, and they use it in measurements. We can find it. It's based on a shell, and the spiral of a shell, and you can see it in a lot of places in nature, and shells and flowers and so on. But the Greeks used it in their sculpture, but they used it in their buildings, and they especially used it in buildings like this. This is the Parthenon, and we'll look at the temple to Athena Parthenos later. They're actually working on restoring this right now, so it looks better than what we see in this picture. But they measured the height of this front and the height of the side compared to the width, and they did this same kind of proportion on it. And even in the floor plan, if you look down on the floor plan and measured it, it's 1 to 1.618 in this building. And you can see how large this is compared to these people that are in some of these pictures. So that is an example of the golden mean, or the golden section. Michelangelo used it in his proportions in his buildings. Let me see if the text says something else. It just continues to talk about this. But you see, even on the long side, how they're taking the height and comparing it to the side there, the side measurement. I'm not going to ask you to give me the mathematical formula for this, but mainly that you know that the golden mean is this Greek concept of ideal proportion, one side compared to the other. Now, one thing we didn't talk about is rhythm. We'll do that the first of class. Look at your notes. We'll go over this together Tuesday, and it'll be fresh on your mind then. But if you have any questions between now and then, or before you leave today, let me know. We'll go over this last part in class on Tuesday. I won't keep you any longer. If you didn't see your test, let us know before you leave. If you have any questions, email me. Yes, ma'am. Next Tuesday. And I'll prepare you right